Hello, everyone. We're now ready to go ahead and get started. To kick us off, I'd like to welcome OE Global Open Leadership Awardee of 2025 and conference board member Tanya Spilavoy onto the stage to introduce our speakers.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to Day 2 of the 2025 Open Education Conference. We hope you had a great first day, filled with ideas, connection, and a renewed sense of what's possible when we keep our eyes on the horizon. We're beginning today with a truly special conversation that invites us to reflect deeply on what it means to build and sustain open education movements rooted in care, imagination, and collective action. Today, we're excited to be able to host a conversation between best-selling author Maree Brown and the open education community's very own Apurva Ashok. Apurva is the executive director of the Rebus Foundation, a global nonprofit and Canadian charity advancing liberatory futures through education. Apurva is an accomplished leader in open education, and she is recognized for her ability to inspire systemic change and build institutional capacity through vision, collaboration, and strategic action. Apurva will serve as today's discussant, bringing her own reflections and questions to this conversation about community, creativity, and the future of openness. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Apurva onto the stage to introduce Adrienne and kick off our discussion.
Thank you, Tanya.
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Yesterday, on day 1 of the conference, I heard a lot about how educators must be prepared to fill the gap of human experience. Haley Norris actually said this at one of the final sessions of the day. And I think we're seeing how important community is as we try to envision the future of open. Today, I'm really eager to dive into these themes with the incredible Maree Brown. And so I'm pleased to introduce Maree Brown, best-selling author, activist, facilitator, whose work has inspired communities around the world to reimagine how we create change. Her books, which you'll see next to me if you're here in person actually, include Emergent Strategy, Pleasure Activism, Holding Change, and Loving Corrections. All of these books have become essential guides for anyone working towards liberation and transformation in every field, including education. As I see it, Adrienne weaves education into her work as a facilitator, as an author, as a science fiction scholar, and as a gardener growing healing ideas. She said, so much of transformative justice is saying, I don't think you're done learning yet. Adrienne describes herself as a joyful conduit, as someone who's offering leadership and healing, and I'm really excited to be in conversation together this morning. Welcome, Adrienne, to the Open Education Conference. As many of you know, and Adrienne, as you've heard, the theme of the conference this year is Eyes on the Horizon. We're emphasizing resilience, innovation, determination to navigate the current, I would say, turbulent times, but also thinking of how we can chart the future of education worldwide. And this is sort of where I want to start our conversation today, and where I think we meet you in your journey with your newest book, Loving Corrections. You've said in Loving Corrections, adaptations are the way the natural world keeps moving toward life. The education field is undergoing an immense and rapid amount of change that's shaping all of our lives, driven by economics, the increasing costs on students, technology, AI, layoffs, policy changes that include the defunding of research, limiting international student visas. It's really hard to keep up and also slow down. Can you tell us a little bit more about your relationship with change and adapting with change as it emerges? How do we need to adapt as a field and as a community to survive the current moment? How do we thrive beyond just survival?
Beautiful. Well, first, can everyone hear me?
We can.
Yes. Okay. Hi. Hello, everybody in the beautiful audience, everyone here. Thank you for having me. Apurva, thank you. I'm excited to be in conversation with you. Yeah, my relationship to change is, I think in some ways I'll share a lot of similarities with you in the room because I started off trying to create systems to make the world better. I tried to work within what was already here to figure out, like, how do I help people have justice? You know, I was always into social justice, environmental justice. And we built these gorgeous infrastructures, gorgeous institutions. And then the rug would always be pulled out from us because we're operating inside of systems that don't share the same goal that we share. And I think that's such an important part to recognize that I always say we're living inside of someone else's imagination for how the world could be. And part of what we're trying to do is activate our own imagination. Remember, we have them, activate the imagination of those we teach and reach so that people can be like, oh, the first thing is to remember you have to share the goal with the whole system. And if you don't, you're constantly going to be having that rug pulled out from under you. But even if you did share the same goals, the rug is still going to get pulled because change is constant. And so that was the second big wisdom for me, was like, oh, some of these changes are personal and they feel very hard. Some of them are not personal. It's just life is a constantly changing condition. And so how do we build institutions? How do we build infrastructures, networks, patterns, systems of learning, systems of collaboration that work with constantly changing conditions? And I don't have all the answers on this, but I do know that in my own practice of getting in right relationship with change, there have been these patterns that have emerged. One of them is about focusing on relationship. And my mentor, Grace Lee Boggs, who is a Chinese American activist based in Detroit, she always talked about critical mass. Critical connections are more important than critical mass. And I feel like that's one of the most important pieces of how we build infrastructure, is understanding that instead of trying to build the biggest fortified walled structure of mass possible, it's actually really important that we're building relationships between ourselves and other people who believe what we believe, care about what we care about, are trying to do some of the things that we're trying to do. And even if we have different beliefs, if we're both trying to help these kids, we're both trying to help these folks, how can we align the work that we're trying to do, and how can we be in right relationship with each other? The other thing is, change requires conflict. And I always want to bring this up as early in the process as possible, because particularly right now, there's a way that we can look at the changes that are happening and try to be conflict avoidant about it. How do we just do this without going head to head? Sometimes you've got to go fight. Sometimes the only way to make room for what we want is to be willing to go head to head and to say, that's not just, that's not fair, that's not what we deserve, that's not what our students deserve, and finding those places where it makes sense to push back. So those are some of the things that I feel like I've learned from my experiences with change. And adaptation should emerge from capacity. So a group needs to look at, what do we know how to do right now? What do we not know how to do? If we're not good at conflict, it's going to be really hard to do it. There's ways we can grow that skill set. Let's develop our skills. And in times like this where it feels overwhelming, one of the best things you can do to survive this time is be honing a skill. Because even if you're overwhelmed right now, if you're honing a skill that entire time, then when we do come back into, power, or we do come back into decision-making places, or we do have the opening to push things forward, we actually know what we're doing. I think we lose a lot of faith with people when we're like, we need this, and then we show up and we don't know how to do it. So I think a lot of times it's like, how do I become the living embodiment of the transformative systems or infrastructures I want to see in the world? And how do I hone the skills, even in fallow times?
That's beautiful. You don't see with your people in the room, but everyone is saying yes, clapping.
Okay.
In response. You mentioned
Okay,
right
good.
relationship. And what does that mean to you? How can we stay in right relationship to each other? And do you have tips for us on consensus building?
Yeah, I do. One thing I just want to check, my little tech thing, is I see some comments about the audio settings, and let me know for the folks on Zoom. I think the people in the room are probably maybe fine.
I think so.
But I'm going to try to
thumbs up, but people in the room. Let us.
People in the room seem fine. I'm just going to check and see if there's any way to turn up my audio output.
James and Patrick, I'm going to call her to maybe
All right.
fix the very quiet video.
Okay. I just tried to make it a little louder, but let me know. Volume is still very low. Okay. Some people are having it. All right. Okay. So back to your question. Remind me your question.
How do we stay in right relationship with each other? What are tips on consensus building or living with this difference when I think we want the idea that 100% consensus is going to happen?
That's such a lovely idea. So one of the things that humbles me all the time is to think about the family that I grew up in. And we come from the same context. We came from the same systems. We experienced the same kind of punishments and permissions and everything else. And I can't remember the last time that my family had consensus on anything, even the simplest things like ordering lunch or going to the movies or anything. So if we let go of the idea that even people who all think alike or are developed in the same system are going to come to the same consensus, then we can start to understand, consensus isn't about everyone is looking the same way, moving the same way, doing the same thing. It's about balancing all those differences. And I think that balancing act is part of how we get in right relationship with each other. Part of it is recognizing the other person is truly another person than you, that they come from a different context, that they have different needs, and that you might not know everything that they need to know. You might not have answers. You might not have solutions, but you have a lived experience and they have a lived experience. And what you're trying to do is sort of clear the channel so that you can actually see and hear each other and find the best option, which doesn't mean the low-hanging fruit, like the thing that, we can get everyone to agree to this and no one's excited about it, but let's move forward. And I know y'all know what I'm talking about with that so often that's what we call consensus. And I find it very disappointing because I'm like, no, we need invigorating, exciting plans. And so again, you have to be willing to battle for things. And we have to say, okay, over half of us are really thrilled about trying this and we're going to put our effort in. And can we also do another experiment for the people who really want to see something else happen? Sometimes we have the capacity and the resources to try multiple experiments at once, and we forget that. And we think, we can only do the one thing. It's also interesting to see what happens when we make consensus that isn't enthusiastic, but everyone has agreed to it, and the stuff doesn't end up happening, right? Those plans go in the drawer. No one quite moved it. We don't know why. We didn't actually get into it. It's because no one was excited about it. So I'm really always looking for enthusiastic consent. And even if it's a smaller number of people who are like, yes, we really want to be in this together, we're going to try it out. I think the other piece about right relationship is recognizing that if we have an experimental stance, then we don't have to hold right and wrong with such rigidity. So I think that's one of the things that can happen sometimes. Like, my plan is better. I've got the right way. You've got the wrong way. Instead of being like, look, what we're doing right now isn't working. Let's experiment with this. And if it doesn't work, let's see how long we want to experiment with it. And if that doesn't work, let's try something else. And this way you gain so much more data, right? I said, nothing is a failure. Everything is a lesson. And I always really feel that you're gathering data each time you try something and it doesn't work out. And if you're working with each other, you're like, okay, we tried that. A lot of people were into it. It went pretty well. Some of the things could be fixed. Having that spirit of experimentation helps right relationship thrive. And then this is silly and I think it's obvious, but I always remind people to have a spirit of celebration. When you're working with each other, when you're moving with each other, part of our relationship comes from feeling like, oh, you see me. Oh, you see that I'm going through something. Celebrating everything you can. Yay, you got married. Yay, you got divorced. Yes, you finished your educational thing. No, you dropped out and that's the right thing. Whatever it is, just having that spirit of I see the person that you are who's also navigating all these things. And I'm a person too, navigating all these things. And if you can see and celebrate who I am as I navigate it, it makes me much more likely to want to stay in a relationship with you. You acknowledge my humanity. I'm not just a cog in the wheel. I'm not just a job title. I'm not just someone holding those positions, but those are some things that I find really help.
Those are beautiful tips to recognize the humanity. You also said, I think in emergent strategy, that species only survive if we learn to be in community. We need we need each other to survive.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
how do we submit to this idea of, well, we don't know. We don't know what's coming up next. We don't know if we're on the right path, but we still need to do the right thing.
Yeah, I love that. You know, one of the things that helps me is to remember that we are making the path. There's not a path, right? So I always have to remind myself of this. I was recently talking to a friend. My sister and I have a podcast, and we were talking to a friend named Chinyere Tutashinda. And she was talking about how, like, none of us have ever ended capitalism before. And if we can sort of, look at each other and just be like, have you ended it? Have you done it? Like, none of us have ever done that, right? None of us have ever fully decolonized from a global colonial endeavor. None of us have, in our lifetimes, none of us have done something of that scale. None of us have lived without war. None of us have done so many of the things that we know our species needs, and maybe we believe our species is capable of, but we haven't actually got that in our systems. We are making a way. And what we do have is a history of people who have made some parts of the way, right? Like, we can look back and be like, oh, here's what Haiti did. Oh, here's what the French did. Oh, here's what, we can look back at history and be like, some people were able to achieve some changes in their time relative to their conditions. We have a much more globally connected system than probably any group of people that's tried to create change before. And so that can make it feel like all of our work has to be at that scale. I'm always trying to bring the work back down to the scale of our lives and be like, okay, all of this needs to change. I'm only responsible for forging part of the path. What is the part that I can actually forge? What can I do with my one lifetime? And that might feel like, oh, I've got to get so small, but I'm like, really small individual lives can make a huge difference in relationship to other lives. Harriet Tubman's life matters so much, but only because of what she did for so many other people, one at a time, a handful of people at a time. But we still remember her name because she forged literal pathways when there didn't seem to be one available. There was no playbook. There was no one telling her which way to go. She just had a star, owl song, and some faith that, like, something had to be better than this captivity. I carry that spirit in me all the time, that I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not going to get a million gazillion people to follow me, but if I can get one person to, like, really believe me and emerge with me, one or small group of 5 people to try adaptation instead, it's amazing how quickly you find people who are like, I am willing to try something else. And the path gets wider when more people are forging it together, when more people are experimenting together. And then I think it's important to be learning as we go. So I really get sad when I see people, like, plundering ahead and just being like, I know it's not working, but I'm going to keep chopping this way. No, why? You're wasting time, energy, resources. Stop. Being willing to stop and pause and check in and be like, is this the way, right? If Harriet kept leading people south or west, everyone would not call her name out, right? We wouldn't be excited about the risk she was taking. We were like, that was foolish. That was not helpful. No, we want to actually take in the information and be like, okay, we tried this. It didn't work. Let's adapt. Let's figure out the next North Star, or let's figure out the next source of water, right? And I think of these things quite literally. I'm like, nature is almost always a place we can turn to for guidance here. Nature, when the new path needs to be formed, sometimes water is forming that path, and it's a droplet at a time, but it can open up a rock. I think about that all the time, that I'm like, we seem to be facing a wall. There seems to be no way through, no way out. Right now is such a daunting time, and I never want to diminize that. I'm like, it is hard to be awake and paying attention right now. And it's not a wall, actually, right? It's a lot of people, many of whom are related to us, who we have to be able to reach and find a pathway that includes them and moves through this together, right? So those are some thoughts there.
Those are beautiful. As you're seeing in the chat, people are echoing your ideas that history is our playbook. And also thinking about Indigenous ways of teaching and learning, and thinking about what we're doing now sets the stage for the 7 generations to come after us. We're here on the lands, those of us in the room in Denver, on the lands of the Ute, the Arapaho, the Cheyenne nations, and over 40 other nations who call these lands home. I think there's so many lessons to learn from there.
Absolutely. And I will say this, I'm here, I'm on the land of the Okinichi, Lumbee, Skurure, Eno, and and Tuscarora peoples. And one of the things I constantly remind people about Western wisdom versus Indigenous wisdom, Western wisdom is all about saying we have to know everything, categorize everything, that everything can be known. So much Indigenous wisdom is being like, what is the possibility? We actually don't know. There's a lot of mystery. There's a lot that we could still figure out. We can be humbled by our teachers. There's a trickster afoot. Like, there's so much more playfulness and mystery in Indigenous cosmologies and Indigenous belief systems that I think are so useful for all of us to remember. We all come from that at some point. At some point, we were connected to the land, and the land is fun. The land is playful. The land is ever changing. The land is abundant. That's what we're trying to get back to, right? And so it's like trying to remember, like, oh, we come from wisdoms. We will go back to them. We will adapt them. We will evolve them with what we're learning now.
And all we are is story. That's what Richard Wagamese said. You also alluded when you were answering the earlier question about the limitations of the mind. You know, we can't conceive and ideate and imagine new worlds. Can you tell us all a little bit about how hope or imagination can be a useful tool or practice for us to adopt right now?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I've done a lot of reading about people who were in impossible conditions. That's one of my favorite things is figuring out, like, how do people keep going? Like, how did people keep going, you know, not just in the first moments of enslavement, but 7 generations into it, where it was just like, we're just here. This is all we've ever known. And what is it that allows someone to be like, I still believe in my freedom. Something else is possible. People who've experienced genocide. It's like, okay, there's so few of us. Now we're still here. How do we keep going? And at those moments when it feels like all is lost, imagination really becomes the only thing we have that says, I can still imagine myself in this future, and I can imagine something better for myself. So those who are in power, those who are benefiting from us not being awake or not having our imaginations activated, they don't want us to be imagining anything. So much of what we see right now is people trying to fill our minds and keep us fully distracted. And it's easy to slip into a world in which you don't even have time to imagine. Every moment is being filled with someone else's voice, someone else's feed on social media, some other one entertainment, gossip about famous people that you're never going to meet and who don't care about you. Like, so many things to fill your mind so that you never, ever have to worry about imagining anything. And so part of what I'm saying to people is like, that's the big prison now that many of us are in. Is that we think that we think we may be making decisions, right? We don't even realize we're playing inside such a limited, tiny little box. And we're like, oh, maybe we can elect this person versus that person. No, babies, that's not it. That's not how we get free. So far, we've tried electing all different kinds of people and, yes, participate in the electoral system as a harm reduction method, but like our imagination is about how we make a new world. And that has to go outside of the boundaries and the boxes that oppressors want us to stay inside of. And I'm constantly telling people, you don't have to sign off of everything and don't do anything, but make time for imagination in your life, in your own life. Make time to meditate, to just even ask yourself occasionally the question, how do I think we're going to get out of this? How do I imagine us getting through this? What kind of humanity is on the other side of this that I can anticipate looking forward to? One of the reasons I speak about Octavia Butler's work so much is that she was not, she didn't flinch in the face of bad times, right? She was just like, it's bad, it's going to get worse. But she still flexed her imagination to be like, even if it's getting worse, I can still see a way that humanity should keep going through this. I can imagine love. I can imagine sex and pleasure. I can imagine children. I can imagine gardening. I can imagine creating these pockets of freedom and justice. I can imagine us leaving the earth and going off to see other stars. I can imagine aliens coming to help us out. I can imagine so many different ways out of this. And some of them may seem illogical, but I think back of other sci-fi writer, Samuel Delany, could imagine the internet long before we had anything like a functional internet. So there's people who are imagining things that seem far off, but only until we start to make it so. And I think right now is a time where we have to activate
and imagination for like, what do we think is beyond this kind of hateful default practice, right? One of the reasons I speak openly about love is because I think it's the only thing at the scale of the hatred that we're up against. And again, people have tried to make it very unrealistic, but I'm like, I think love is the only thing that gets us through hard times. Someone loves us enough to keep us alive, even though it's a strain to them. Someone loves us enough to stand between us and the ICE agents who are coming for us. Someone loves us enough to steal us away and tuck us into their home so we can sneak our way north to freedom. Like, those are loving acts. You can love a stranger this way. You can love a neighbor this way. We have to love our families this way, because right now I have family members who I'm like, I feel like you're caught in a matrix of hate, but I love you, so I'm not letting go of your hand. Now, I may not be able to say much. I'm just going to hold on to it and be like, girl, I can't even. But here we are, my family, we get together and we play cards. And I'm like, I'm playing cards with people who I know diametrically oppose almost everything I stand for. I'm not letting them go, and I'm not letting them away from having to contend with me as I imagined myself as a Black queer woman with these piercings and these tattoos and this level of freedom and this level of agency over my life. I imagined all of that. That was not given to me. And then I forced myself into that life, and I continue to push into it. So I want to say that. There's something about staying connected. Mm-hmm. There's something about imagining with others and reminding people that their imagination is not dead until they are.
Thank you. And that example you had, about love and checking in with your family, playing cards, those are the actions of holding someone's hand and not letting go. That's how you show that you love them.
Yes. And even being willing sometimes to argue. I look up to my mother because she continues to go back to her family and have these hard conversations. And I know it's not easy. Sometimes I'm just like, why do you keep going? And she was doing it when none of us would go. We'd be like, we're not going. And she would be like, I still got to go. I made a commitment to love them. When her father died, she's like, I made a commitment to keep going back and to stay in relationship. I love my family. And she would go and she would be like, it doesn't mean we can't talk politics. It doesn't mean we can't be who we are, but you have to always contend with who I am. I don't want to fight about it. I'm just going to be it. And there's something so wise about that. Sometimes we forget that how we are in the world is an emergence of our imagination. Like, we're all putting on a show. Look around at each other. Look around at each other, right? Everyone in here put together the look that they have right now for you. They said, here's how I'm going to do my hair. Here's how I'm going to put my outfit. Here's the image I want you to believe. I look together. I look professional. I look like I know what I'm talking about. Whatever it is, right? We all have some story that we are living into with every little choice. And I always tell people, I'm like, we can do the same thing for the whole shape of our society, right? That's all we're saying. It's like, make the decisions together and work to make them come into being.
And we are connected, no matter how I conceived of myself in my mind and chose to put on this dress. This necklace is from my mother.
By the way, I love it.
Oh, thank you. You talked about Octavia Butler, and you use a word in one of your books that I love and I would love to share with others listening to this conversation. You call it science fictional behavior.
Yes.
What is that, and how can someone adopt it?
Yeah, so I think it's science fictional behavior to look at what is and imagine what could be. And in science fiction, there's a couple of key questions that we ask ourselves as in our writing. So one is, what if? What if this changed? What if that changed? There's one question that's, if this goes on, kind of what will happen, right? Octavia was great at those questions where she was like, okay, she was writing in the 80s, like, there's a climate catastrophe starting to emerge. People are writing about this and thinking about this. If this goes on, if we don't check it, what will the world look like? And she wrote that, right? And then what can I do? Or what can I add? Like, what can I imagine? And I always think about how we look at the world with this kind of science fictional behavior, even when we're at a small scale, like a conflict is arising at work. And it's like, if this goes on, if this keeps moving and we don't check it and no one brings justice or brings mediation or helps it stop, what's going to happen? And so often we let stuff like that build up. We don't look ahead and be like, oh, I'm just going to not deal with it this time. Instead of realizing, like, if I don't deal with it this time and no one else deals with it this time, our organization may eventually split or fall apart, right? We've had a lot of organizational disruption. I think, we can look back now at recent history and be like, we were not science fictional enough with how we looked at what was happening amongst certain communities that were getting upset and feeling unseen. And we're like, if this goes on, those folks are going to storm the Capitol and they're going to try to take over everything. And then they will. Like, that's what happens if you leave a disgruntled energy and you don't, I don't know if there's a word gruntling, but if you don't tend to it, right?
We made
don't
it up right now.
I was like, you need to gruntle these people, okay? You need to like hold and tend to the part of people that feels unseen. I think this is so, in science fictional behavior, there's a way that we're like, oh, I'm responsible for what happens in this world. And we also talk about specifically that like anyone who's trying to change the world, anyone who's explicitly like, I see how it is and I'm trying to change it, we call that science fictional behavior, because you are now actually saying, I am twiddling with the future. I'm trying to shift it. I'm moving the knobs. I'm making adjustments. And you are writing a sci-fi story even if you're not writing it on the page, because you are investing in changing things. And I love teachers because I'm like, you're doing this over and over and over and over and over again. Like every classroom that comes in, you don't know which of those people is like, that's going to be the one. And that group over there is going to be the group. And those folks over there are going to be the ones. They're going to change it all. The way I believe in people who are younger than me is, it's maybe a little unrealistic, but I just have such faith. I'm just like, I remember being 20 years younger than I'm now and how unfettered my imagination was, how unfettered my sense of possibility for change was. That is a precious resource. So even now that I'm a little older and a little bit more like, I don't know, I'm getting scared. I want to keep my house, I'm like, okay, but there's someone out there who's like, I don't even have a house yet. Put me in the streets, And like, as teachers or older people don't have a house, But yeah, I think there's something really beautiful about the idea that like everyone we're building with, everyone we're talking to could be an agent of change, and we could be the agent of change. And that's science fictional behavior. It's like, oh, we're living in a future that someone else imagined, and they thought we would have flying cars, but we have flying everything else. So, we're in a mess. But I really like to think about that, bringing your imagination into even the smallest moments, considering that some act of kindness or some act of awakening could actually transform a much larger condition. It could ripple out into something much larger. There's this beautiful quote I've seen floating around on the internet that's like, we all understand when we watch a time travel movie that if you change one thing when you go to the past, you could change the whole future. But we don't approach our present day activities that way. That it's like, if I do one thing differently, I could change the whole future. But I'm like, but we could. We know it when we look backwards. We have to remember it in the present.
I keep going back to you because you said we want to be an intervention in the present that changes history. It changes the future.
I feel, and if everyone's ever been facilitated by me, I hold every space like we are a historical group. Like, let's think of ourselves as in the most historic sense that we could. You all are sitting in that room right now, and you have to hold yourselves as if what you do right now changes the future of education, right? You have to hold it that way. And then whatever you do will change the future of education. It may change it in smaller ways, right? But those small ways will ripple out into something else. Someone had the idea long before you had this many people built around it, right? You have to remember that you were smaller than you are now. You'll be bigger, right? It'll keep growing relationally, growing and growing and growing.
Maree Gu, from someone in our field from eCampus Ontario, likes to say, open is a possibility. Let's not close the doors on that.
That's right. That's right. And like, there's a possibility, I always tell people, I'm like, if you can imagine it, if you're thinking about it, that means it's already possible. It's already possible because it already lives here. All you have to do is figure out, how do you realize it in the world? How do you realize it relationally? And I'm always telling people, bring it to your own life. How did you fall in love? How did you start to build family? How did you know when it was time to set a boundary? How did you know when it was time to move? Something happened. Something synapsed in here. Something created a little dream for you. You heard something and it planted a seed in you. Those ways of creating change, we forget about it. I'm like, it's dreaming, it's talking. It's very simple. It's very sweet, and it's how we have always done things. So now we get to do the same thing while we imagine a future that we want to live in.
Future dreaming. That's what Mia Zamora says. Um, I love the idea, and then I have there's the tension inside me that has to do with time. As I see it, there's a palpable urgency that I feel, and maybe others in the community will resonate right now, whether to meet that accelerated growth of AI, which I saw in the chat, or to stop issues from growing more unmanageable than they are now. How can we be patient about dreaming slowly, about moving, as you say, at the speed of one person changing slowly?
Yeah. Yeah, I struggle with this one too. I'm not the most patient person in the world. Actually, I'm kind of notoriously impatient. All the people who work with me know that I'm always like, well, can't we just do it now? Let's do it now. Let's do it now. Let's do it today. Right. So this is a place where I'm constantly trying to strengthen my own muscle because I know when I look at my life that it often takes me 1 to 5 years to actually change anything that I even notice. And that's if I notice it. Right. And sometimes I need other people to help me notice or bring something to my attention. So when I think about that pace of how fast a person changes, or how fast a family changes. My family is a mixed race family, Black and white in the deep South. And I always say, like, I'm 47, my parents have been together 49 years. So it's almost 50 years that it's taken for this family to start to even communicate across the lines. So I always tell people that because I'm like, the urgency is mostly produced, right? Someone is producing a sense of urgency and someone is producing circumstances that are more and more urgent, right? Like when we were first humans on this earth, we were not creating urgent climate catastrophes. Someone made choices that led us into this state now where there's hurricanes happening and wildfires happening. There are urgent crises happening that it took humans a long time to produce, right? And it took decisions over and over again to produce. I keep telling people the urgent thinking that got us into this mess is not going to get us out of it. We have to slow down and bring our attention over to important thinking, thinking about what actually matters to us, what actually is a priority, what is not just busy work. I often notice if I slow down urgent work that I'm just doing a bunch of busy tasks. None of it is yielding the kind of results that I want. I find as a facilitator, as a human, as a lover, in every way, when I slow down and deepen, the results of everything I'm doing are better. And what that slowing down might mean is things can move faster down the line. So I often talk about this when it comes to trust, that people always are like, oh, building trust. Like, I don't want to do any more trust building exercises. I'm so tired of talking to my coworkers, whatever. But I'm like, you don't just build trust through like exercises outside of the practice of what we're doing. You build trust by really noticing we're in a practice right now. Something's unfolding. How do we want to handle it? Let's debrief how we handled it. What did I learn about you? What did you learn about me? Okay, that part is slow at first. I'm learning you. But then a year down the line, I'm like, oh, I already know how she's going to handle this. I already know I can count on her to handle it. I don't even have to say the word. I'm going to look at her, girl, you soft? Yeah. Okay. And then we just move, right? So I'm always trying to get to that level of like, oh, now the speed of change and trust is sped up because we have it, right? So that's my response to the urgent work is like find people you actually want to build trust with, figure out what's actually really important to you, and make decisions that allow every action you do to move towards those important ends that you're trying to reach. Yeah. And unless you are an emergency room worker, right? Which there are emergency room workers, but I don't think it's a conference of emergency room workers here. So I would be really surprised. But unless you're an emergency room worker, most of your work is not urgent in that way. And most of it would benefit from a little bit of pacing and bring yourself to the moment. Now, the thing I will say is urgent, I think, is making sure you lift into the light what's real. We have an urgent need to face reality right now. And so every time I'm in a space where I can be like, here's some reality, let me dose you quickly. I'm not going to give you a bunch of fanfare around it. This is just what's happening. I find that is urgent. I find that I have very little patience for for when people try to be like, oh, we need a dialogue somewhere. We need to talk, like, no. we're past that place. Right now, people are all losing their benefits. They're losing access to education. People are dying. Genocides are happening. This is all real happening. This is real, right? So let's cut to what's really real so that we can actually make important decisions that matter and move us out of this urgent crisis mode.
Yeah, it's a way to balance not ignoring the reality, but not accepting it as inevitable. There are other
Also, like being able to understand, like in this moment, I keep telling people, I'm like, there are climate catastrophes that are going to be unfolding for some time now. I can't tell you, like, we can urgently get ourselves out of this climate catastrophe season. That's not what's happening. It would be disingenuous for me to try to paint that picture. So I'm like, we have urgent climate catastrophes happening. What are the most important choices we can make to better fortify ourselves and our communities to actually survive that? Most of our education right now should actually be turning an eye towards how do our people survive this time that we're in and the time that's coming? What are the new skill sets? What are the new frameworks and understandings that our people, our students, our communities need in order to survive right now? If we're teaching people math, it's like, what is the math of survival? How much of this do we need to feed this many people? How much of this do we need to desalinate water for this many people? Like, that's the math I'm interested in, right? How do we help people understand what every human needs to survive? That's the new science, right? How do we understand relationships, right? What are the quantum mechanics of how we are with each other? There's ways of shifting everything you're working on to actually be there for the people who we're serving right now. And I think that's the most important work we can be doing right now. It's like cutting through all the distractions and noise and being like, right now, I want you to survive, and here's everything you need to know to do that.
What's keeping you going?
Me?
Yeah.
So many things. I have a lot of kids in my life, not my own kids, which is part of how they keep me going. I was like, I give them back, and that action keeps me going. No, but I have a lot of children in my life that I spend significant time with. One little 4-year-old just had her birthday party this past weekend, and it was a mermaid unicorn birthday party where all of the kids were, they're going to a school where like there's not a lot of emphasis on gender or difference. There's a lot of emphasis on just like magic and like who do you want to be. And so the kids really identify as magical beings most of the time, because if you could, why wouldn't you? And so everyone is wearing rainbows and unicorn horns and butterfly wings and everything all together all at once in like so many colors. And I was just looking at them like, I only have to make sure y'all are okay. Like, I just have to make sure you maintain your magic as long as you possibly can, because that magic is going to be the resource that you use for the rest of your life. Love keeps me going. I'm wildly in love right now. And it really helps me every day to just remember like, oh yeah, like this is possible even in time like now. It's possible for me to love and to receive love. And then I've always had an eye for the resistance. So I was raised watching Star Wars, from a very young age. I was just like, okay, so the resistance is like okay, those are my people. Robin Hood, resist, like I was just like, I watched the right things, and I make sure all my kids, I'm like, you guys all need to watch Robin Hood so you know about fighting false kings and dressing in drag and giving to the poor. And then you all have to watch Star Wars so you understand the importance of the resistance, and that even when empire seems impenetrable, that what happens is you go to nature, you get with the Ewoks, you figure out who your other allies are. And right now I keep an eye on the resistance. So I really pay attention to all those acts, especially of people who don't think of themselves as revolutionaries or radicals, people who are like, I'm just doing my job. I'm a scientist, I'm a teacher, I'm a doctor, I'm just doing my job. And I have to fight now in order to do my job, and I'm going to keep showing up for my job. I get so blown away by that. Postal workers and park rangers. And I mean, it moves my heart, because I'm just like, oh, I'm not some weirdo out on the edge. I'm just another person who loves the earth, and there's so many of us. I'm another person who loves humans and wants us to exist, and there's so many of us. And by bringing my attention there, I'm like, we are the vast majority of humans on earth, and that keeps me going. I'm like, yes, we are still being controlled by a small force, just like when the sun never set on the British. Now it's the sun never sets on the assholes. But here we are, nonetheless, right? And we keep going.
We keep going. Andy, that was your plug to watch Andor. We were talking about that the other day.
Yes, Andor is so thrilling right now. It should be like required viewing.
Everybody add that to your syllabus. We have about,
Bye.
go on. We have about 13
I
minutes.
know I actually have to say this because I'm like, you all actually have the power to get all these beautiful sci-fi ideas into so many people's minds. So like, add a little sci-fi to all your syllabi.
Everyone's taking notes. We'll come back for the references later. This
Awesome.
is the time where I'm going to invite everyone to reflect on what Adrienne has been sharing, all the little gems that she has been dropping, whether you're virtual or in person. Think about your questions, and we'll give you a few moments. And I think Adrienne even has a poem for us to help us get into that more reflective space.
Well, I actually have a question-based poem. It's called Ask Questions. All right, here we go. Oh, beloveds, ask questions. Ask questions. We need a shared context, a something together. Together is the point. This vision is not about precision or prophecy. This is the truth. We are each answers, each somebody's heaven, each precious. We shouldn't be so tired. We already belong to the earth, the lush garden, the fresh and salt water, the cave and complexity. Don't believe in trash people, collateral damage, buried history, lost souls. All that hatred is the long lie. No one blooming life is a threat to you. Don't teach your children to wither or delight in enemies. We cannot be better than the worst of us or safer than the danger we allow. We cannot leave poison in the soil. We must pull it whole where it's rooted. We are a pattern, life and death intertwined, learning to hold the love of God. We are a web vibrating strands of home, learning to catch our breath. So listen, and ask questions.
That's beautiful. Chills, as you said that.
I'll drop the link in this thing.
Thank you.
Here we go.
And for everyone in person, we'll share this link out afterwards so you can revisit this poem. If you have a question in person, raise your hand. Someone will come to you with a mic. If you are online, take a moment to type it into the chat. Adrienne and I are both reading and watching. And we'll get to as many as we can in the next 10 minutes. You're doing good, Adrienne? While we wait for questions?
Yes, I'm going to drink some water.
Good. I'll do the same. This is a hydration check, everybody.
Everybody drink some water. Act like you live in a time of accessible, good water.
Right?
I really tell people, I'm like, there is no reason to be dehydrated and dusty and ashy in this time. That might not be coming for us, but right now you can be hydrated. There's no reason to be anything other than nice and smooth.
Hi, Adrienne. My name is Elm, and I just have to say that your talk is filling my soul, and really coming at a very important time in my life, because this is the year that I am coming out to my entire family, who are Christian nationalists, very conservative Trump supporters, and I'm terrified.
You're going to be doing for all of them.
Yeah.
They need to know. They need to know.
That's
good for you.
What I'm starting to feel is that there is a lot of power in being true to yourself and telling your story. And in this kind of new era, especially at my college, which is about to lose a lot of humanities professors. I think it's about 27. It seems like an attack on our ability to imagine, and our ability to help students imagine. And I would just love to ask you, what do you think what's one thing that we can all implement to help our students imagine, cross-disciplinarily, right? So I think we're entering this era where we have to all be holding a torch for the humanities and for imagination. And so I just love to get your thoughts about what's something that we can all just take to our classrooms right now to help our students imagine what's possible.
Well, I mean, I'm really moved by the moment you're in your life. And so I think I want to stick with it a little bit to say, bringing stories like that into the classroom, bringing stories of how you're navigating your own humanity so that your students can see you, so that all of our students can see us as like, we're all in this together. I think there's a benefit right now to letting go of the, you know, there's some hierarchy that's necessary in a classroom, right, to maintain order. But then there's this other thing that can happen where we're like, I'm the expert and nothing's bothering me. And that's not the reality. The reality is like we're all kind of on different front lines. We all have our backs against different walls. And I think it really helps for our students to see that, like, and to demystify stuff. Like, if you know, like, we're losing these professors, tell them why, right? Make it clear, make it plain. This is another thing for your students to learn. I always know that I went to Columbia University at a moment when the ethnic studies struggle was happening. And it helped me that people told me, here's why we're in this struggle. And here's the professors who are really committed to not having ethnic studies and not learning about us. And that helped me. It helped me to move into the school and feel like, yeah, I've got something to do. I've got something to push for here. So that's one thing. I already said science fiction. So, whether it's watching things or recommending things for people to read together. And I think you should do whatever calisthenics you need to do to make it fit into the syllabi, right? So y'all can figure out how you make it connect. But I think making people aware that you think imagination is an important skill set to apply alongside of whatever else you're teaching them. And then asking questions. I'm going to say this over and over again, but like using the space you have in the classroom to help people have conversations that help bring them into this moment. So really, did you see this piece of news? How did it impact you? Do you have any context for it? Does anyone in the classroom know something about this? What can we do to care for it? Having a real care orientation. How could our community be caring for the things that are happening, whether it's something far away or something up close? Or how can we be preparing for things? Right now, I have a lot of friends and family in Jamaica, and so I'm really like watching what's happening with the hurricane there. But I also live in North Carolina, where a hurricane came up the mountain and took out Asheville. And so I'm like, oh, how do I have conversations with people that are not like over there in Hurricaneville, but instead like, how are we all prepared for hurricanes? Because the earth doesn't have any boundaries with where she wants those things to go right now. She's just like, y'all got on my nerves. I'm coming with the hurricane. So how do we keep our folks prepared for what's coming in the moment and keep bringing it home to like, this question my sister and I ask a lot is, what is it you can do that you will do? What is it you can do that you will do? And as a member of any community, as a member of a school system, I think we can get so oriented towards like othering, even in our mind, like someone else is responsible for that. And I wish someone was doing something about this, and I wish someone was doing something about that. And I'm always just like, wipe your mind free of what you want other people to do. You're not in charge of them. You're in charge of you. So what is it that you can do, that you will do, that will let you sleep at night, that will let you look children in the eye, and that will also let you live a good life? This might be my last thing, but I really think we should all be living as good of a life as we can right now. I don't think we should surrender and just be like miserable, because it might be generations of this. It's actually really, really important to live as good of a life we can, to remember that that's possible. I think about that every time I take a bath, and I'm like, I can't believe I get to take a bath right now. Like, I get to write a book in a bath. And I send that back to my ancestors, and I send that forward to whoever comes next. I'm like, this was possible. This was worth it. This is a good life, Those are some thoughts.
That's beautiful. And you should know that a lot of people see you and are sending you love in the chat.
Oh. Yes.
There is a question from the chat. Someone wants to know, what does radical hope mean to you?
Oh. This is good. So there's been so many things about hope. I really love my friend Miriam Kaba talks about hope I think she says hope is an action. Now it's gone from my mind. Perimenopause will do these things to your brain that are just wild, where it's like that's slipping away from me. What I will say is, for me, hope is about how we imagine things, like how we imagine things that make us feel like it's better or it's improving. And then radical is about reaching in, taking something at the root. Radical hope to me is when I'm like, oh, I want to go all the way to the root of this and I want to take action around what I'm imagining. And I'm not really interested in hope as just an emotion. I'm really interested in hope made action or prayer made action, like these things that say I'm anticipating something. And I really want to see it moved into action. When people say they're hopeful, but they're like, I'm not actually going to do anything to make this happen. I think that is the thing that I struggle the most with. And it's discipline. Discipline, because Miriam would laugh so hard because I struggle the most with discipline. But hope is a discipline is what Miriam Kaba said. But I think my thing is about action. It's about imagination and action actually coming together. It's what I do that means someone else can have hope, if that makes sense. Like if I just sit and think about something, it's not going to change the conditions for someone else. But if I'm like, I think that those people deserve to eat, I'm going to take action to pour resources or bring in donations to make sure that that can happen. I have become someone else's hope. And I think that's what we're supposed to do, is each become the answer, right? For someone else's need, each become someone else's hope. So I hope that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Hope has real world consequences. That's what I'm taking away. And you said that. I think that's our time. Yeah, that was in one of your books. I don't remember which one, but it was there. This
is the problem with writing a lot of books, is it starts to be like, right, yes.
But isn't that beautiful? It all just blends and merges together into one.
It's circles, yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today, for your generosity, for your wisdom, for your reminders of our individual and collective power. Thank you for reminding us that trust can play an integral role in our community, but also in imagining those better and brighter futures. I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful we got this last hour together. And I know for me, your words are going to linger on. I'm going to go back to that poem that you shared, but it's also going to stay in my mind and in my actions through my work. Lots of appreciation.
Purva, thank you so much for being in this conversation with me, for your leadership, for your work, and everyone who showed up today. Just know that I'm with you. We're all together in this. You're not alone. And we'll see each other in this.
Yeah. Thank you. Read Adrienne's books. Find her online. Subscribe to her Garden of Healing Ideas. You have a standing ovation in the room. Lots of love. Thank you, Adrienne. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Bye, loves.
Bye.